So this was really, and ask questions as we go, and Lisa's going to talk about the factoids and some of the other materials, but this really was
That's really cute on the bottom.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Collaborative exhibit. Interns worked on this, education worked on it, curatorial worked on it. So lots of people were involved. Yeah, and it has a higher level maybe, or more kind of didactic information than we normally would, in part because we don't get to talk about the tiny creatures very often. So I wanted to ask a question. Who knows how old the word wildlife is? It's only about 100 years old. So in English, it was coined, I think, about 100 years ago, and I believe by Ernest Thompson Seton.
Oh, makes sense.
So before that, you had game or vermin.
Nice.
So vermin, like vermin. There might be a few, like the fish might be game, etc. So it was either animals that you prized for eating or animals that you wanted to get rid of. Or then you had livestock, obviously live living
That's the best thing you
livestock.
wanted to look at.
Right. So in I think the 80s or 90s, and you guys might know this better than I do, when we got away from hunting safaris and wanted to go on photographic safaris, we wanted to change the name of the animals that we were going to see from game to charismatic megafauna. Which is not as easy to say, but charismatic megafauna was a way to try to change your perception of what you were looking at. So you're not looking at game as in this is something that I would want to shoot, but you're looking at a big, charismatic, beautiful creature that you want to enjoy in its own right. So, having that as background, charismatic megafauna, and trying to change the way that we talk about things, I said, well, then this could be charismatic minifauna, and I might have coined that term, and I might not have, but if I did, I want credit for it.
I know. How do you get credit for it? Who do you tell?
Just write it down somewhere. So, but then,
Everybody that you mentor to say,
it's my word.
copyright, do it, copyright.
The biologist who was here also used the term microfauna, but that I think is, tiny, little. But we could look those up. Anyway, there's all kinds of terms, but it all has to do with the way that we've perceived animals over time, which is the fun thing for us.
So microfauna is like a science word.
She said it.
Megafauna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So minifauna might be
Colloquial.
right, or it might be, the marmot versus the caterpillar.
Yeah.
Because micro makes you think of really tiny, whereas a marmot's not a tiny creature.
Right.
In this exhibit it is, but
Right.
so anyway, that's a little bit of background. As you know, the beginning of the museum, most of what we bought and most of what we collected were, moose, bears, big animals, big creatures. Pretty quickly, though, it started to diversify, both in terms of what creatures from North America we began to collect, and then also from around the world. And then as we've grown over the last 30 years, that's certainly been a clear offshoot to diversify the animals in the collection. So sometimes we buy something because it's a really cool depiction of a tiny creature that we don't have. Sometimes, like for the Yellowstone to Yukon exhibit, Dwayne and Y2Y wanted to give us a painting, and instead of having another picture of a bighorn sheep, I said we should have the pika, because it's so important to this region. We don't have a great, pika painting. Who's going to paint these things, right? Not very many people. It is amazing that we have the prairie dog painting that we do down there by William Jacob Hayes. They were kind of fascinating creatures in the late 1800s. People did a ton of anthropomorphizing of the prairie dogs, like their little villages, and ascribed to them different roles and all that fun stuff. So they were a fairly charismatic species even back then. But if you think about the reason historically for a lot of this to be created, it was either to sell in a gallery, so most people would want to buy a picture of a moose moose or a stag or whatever. But also it was for natural history or for illustration. So
Look out.
a lot of these you could consider natural history or illustration. Even this, which is this new acquisition that we got at Collector Circle, attributed to a female artist from Germany in the middle of the 1700s, which is just fantastic and amazing. This would have been done to add to sort of a cabinet of curiosities or something so that you would have beautiful pictures of, say this is a thistle, but with all the different bugs living on it. That you would find in nature. We've got that, some surprises. There's 3 Robert Batemans in here. And that goes right along with Bateman's whole characterization of his own career, which is that he really wanted to focus on the diversity of life out there. So if you go, I think he has a museum in Canada, and what he wanted for that museum was to show the whole range of things that he had done. So we've got the marmot, there's some otters, and then there's a lynx around the corner. These are also things that don't get out very often. Many of them are works on paper. So that's why it's a little dim in certain areas. Some of these things have never been out as far as I know. Maybe those chipmunks, because we just got those framed. There's a few things as we walk down the hall that I can point out. And then, so there's that aspect, natural history, illustration, but also like Alexander Calder, he went to the Bronx Zoo and he was just practicing skills. And so he would go along and he had this crazy like setup table that he walked around with, cardboard table with a string around his neck, and did little sketches of the animals in the zoo, just for his own practice. So kind of like Bob Kuhn practiced really fast sketches, so did Alexander Calder.
And it's funny that the zoo had a shrew.
Yeah,
Right?
they had all kinds of,
Shrew.
it's easier, so
On Mammal House.
The,
Mammal House, the shrew.
the Audubon that we have, the John James Audubon original, which doesn't get out very often, is of mice. And if you remember the history of the quadruped project, the quadruped or the mammal project that Audubon launched into after the birds suffered from the fact that it was really hard to find a lot of big charismatic megafauna to put in the book. So they end up with a lot of smaller creatures like rats, mice, moles, etc., squirrels, whatever. So it's not surprising that we have a drawing of mice by him. And then the painting that we have that you're familiar with is by John Woodhouse Audubon, his son, of Mountain Brook Minks, that used to be in the JKM Gallery for many years. And that, as you know, John Woodhouse Audubon took over the quadruped project at the end of his father's life, and his father started to go a little bit crazy and lose some of his abilities. So I'll stop there. Lisa, do you want to say a few things, and then we can walk down and just point out some fun things as we go.
Yeah, I was going to talk a little bit about how the labels were conceived of.
Yeah.
And I wanted to point out this image right here I sent to some entomologists at a few different research institutions to see if they could identify butterflies and insects. And they said generally they were hard to identify, but this one right here they thought was a painted lady butterfly, which is interesting because she was a female who painted the time when many women. I have no idea if there's a connection there, or if that really is that butterfly depicted, but it's kind of cool, the connection. All right, so when I first heard about this exhibit idea, I thought a little bit about Andy Warhol and Joel Sartori. Just stay with me here. Both Sartori and Warhol use their art to draw attention to and save animal species. And Bronwyn sort of follows that vein here, not as an artist, although she is one of those, but as a curator. So by conceiving of an exhibit that draws our attention and awareness to the little things, many of which are fastest disappearing species on Earth, namely insects, she's working towards a similar goal. So the idea is tiny animals that have a big impact on our world and our lives and our imaginations. So I think Bronwyn said anything small and lynx. Is that kind of her, how she conceived of this, something like that, small creatures. And Warhol's prints include the pine barren tree frog, the San Francisco silver spot butterfly, And of course, Sartori photographed hundreds of insects. And if you look in the rest of the galleries, you'll find some smaller creatures depicted, like Tom Utex and Dacian. There are dragonflies and lots of other little creatures. So the animals in this exhibit are the pollinators, the soil enrichers, the seed spreaders, food for uncounted life on Earth. They're the buzzers, the jumpers, the swimmers, the hoppers. Loosely how they're organized in this exhibit. Insects, for example, make up 80% of life on Earth. 40% of mammals on Earth are rodents. And there are over 5,000 known species of snake, just to kind of get that out there. So these cool animals featured here truly are the most prolific creatures that you see on a daily basis. So think really quickly, what's the last animal that wasn't domestic that you remember seeing?
It wasn't domestic.
What's it?
Just shout it out.
Duck.
A fly.
A fly.
Flies.
No,
They came out. Spiders.
Spiders.
Spider in my
Spiders.
Yes,
Spiders.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Yeah, so these are the small creatures. We don't think twice about them, yet they make up the literal warp and weft of the fabric of life. Without these creatures, life would cease to exist. But this warp and weft isn't unraveling. So with these labels, we were wanting to incite amazement, awe, and wonder about these animals that these artists took, the time to depict so in such detail in amazing ways. So we focus on the natural history of the animals, whereas the artists are focusing on the beauty, their habitat, and other things like that. So it's another way to sort of draw people in, and in that way perhaps care more about these creatures. So when we started writing the labels, we started to get a little depressed. Because with the Think Bigger, we're trying to really emphasize how important these creatures are, and we started getting into it and realizing, these critters are disappearing. For example, with bees, it's colony collapse disorder, lightning bugs are dying off, pythons are threatened with extinction by climate change, so we were like, okay, we can't write these labels this way. We have to really focus on how these animals help humans, and really fascinating facts that incite delight and wonder. So people don't leave depressed, but they are more encouraged to look deeper, try to find these animals in nature, and know that they have a role to play for the health of us and the ecosystems. So we shifted gears to fascinating natural history or scientific facts that make people go, wow, I never knew that armadillos could inflate their intestines and float across rivers. Or, oh my goodness, moths retain their memories throughout metamorphosis, and so are being used as a research focus for the treatment of dementia. Or spider silk is being used to make bulletproof vests. Maybe I won't step on one the next time I see one of my
Wait, how do we know that moths have memories in the first place?
There's a TED Talk about this. There's also, it was published in, I think Scientific American. I have that scientists did some sort of study before and after metamorphosis and determined that they indeed retain the memories. I don't know. I should probably remember the details of that. Yeah, and lightning bug chemicals, scientists are using them to attach to tumors, so when they attach to tumor cells, they glow to identify disease in the body. So these animals may in the future help save our lives, and yet we don't give them a second chance, usually. So these labels are meant to sort of like make us care a little more. So what if we got on a wildlife safari truck, drove into Grand Teton National Park, and stopped at a spider web, or a squirrel nest, or watched a trout swim in the water with the same enthusiasm that we saw a moose or a bear? So I think this exhibit kind of delves into that question. So the labels, we sort of, how do we really get people excited about small wildlife? I mean, the artwork speaks for itself, it's beautiful, but this is a way to get a little bit deeper and a little more, and maybe wonder about these creatures. So perhaps this exhibit will inspire people to slow down, take a few deep breaths, turn away from their phones, and mindfully observe a caterpillar crossing the sidewalk. Or count the delicate uplifts of dust-colored skin. Notice I didn't use the word warts on a toad's back. Or notice that the toad's mouth is turned up in a slight and permanent smile. So to really see these small creatures hiding in plain view, we need to cultivate a commitment to awareness, as Thoreau put it. And through that awareness, maybe will come a wish to help save these animals that are trying to survive in a rapidly changing world, like Ember described, the biologist. So the label content and the silhouettes, actual size of each of the animals featured, are meant to inspire awe and a childlike delight in the marvelous creatures that make up the highest percentage of life on Earth, and have inspired these artists and us, and all these creatures make life possible and better. And so that's kind of why we wrote the labels the way we did.
Yeah, they're supposed to be life size. Some of them are sort of an average size.
Oh,
So I think some of them are maybe on the bigger side, like the porcupine seems huge to me, but I know they can get big.
They really
It's just
are.
kind of fun,
They're
right?
very
It's amazing to see them up close and be like, wow, they really are that big, or they really are that small, because we don't often get that close to them. So that's kind of a fun thing about those labels.
So yeah, let's just walk. Oh, we've got
Yeah.
like 7 Picassos, I think, out here. And then there will be 6 more in the 30 Wonders 30 Years exhibit. Pretty sure this has never been out. This is our only Cuban American artist.
No, kind of like the group of nerds, like they call it business.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't answer my question.
I know, I can't really read it, but we should probably transcribe that. Or it's probably transcribed somewhere. But I was always wonder if that's like a big cheese or a piece of bread. I don't know. It would be more stereotypical if it was like a piece of cheese. Yeah. Black-footed ferret.
You guys should look at videos of armadillos. They're hilarious. That's
And then yeah, this is very odd for its time prairie dog painting. Normally in this era you would have been, painting bison.
so I think I've got
Yeah.
birds and stuff to do.
Yeah, so wildlife was the second project the Audubon launched into after the birds.
Did they also have specimens, right?
Right, so people they put out a call for specimens. So some of the things that Audubon probably saw were just skins. John Woodhouse Audubon went up the Missouri River in the 1860s maybe. There wasn't a lot of animals left. So he didn't see a lot of bison or wolves or anything he wanted to see. By that point they could mostly kill.
Is that why that bear is so hot?
Maybe. They also, John Woodhouse was not as good an artist as his father.
colors.
So,
More. Do you know her?
Yes.
yeah, they were, so they didn't have like
Nearby. Yes.
the
She
ability to
doesn't
go to
recognize
Yellowstone and see a bear or any photos or, any of that kind of stuff. So they probably have bear skin, maybe a bear tattoo, that kind of stuff. This is awesome.
I know it is, but can you speak a little bit?
So this guy was a freed slave, and he lived in down south. I don't want to get there's a whole article or entry about him in Wildlife and American Art in the book. I don't know about this piece. So he would just go out and sit in his yard and draw things all day long on whatever his artist found they were what he could find. And then I don't know if it was an art dealer or someone interested in the arts kind of discovered him and started providing him with materials. There are, in fact, quite a few little trailer pieces out there. The Smithsonian American Art Museum has a ton. But anyway, that's just these really simple kind of, we sometimes call this naive or untrained art. It's just a folk art person who's just driven to do these things. And that's all that they really do. So somebody mentioned there's a great example, Taylor Bigot has represents a similar kind of person from Idaho from more recent times. But this would have been, he was, in the 40s probably, doing this kind of stuff. It's just fun to get a look at this stuff.
These guys look like they're rap stars.
Yeah. Like this, probably they were actually able to see this creature, you know, in their little hands, how they do stuff.
It looked like
So you can, yeah, with Audubons, especially in the 1850s, 60s, we don't know, or sometimes we don't know what they call them today. You can look that up though, Google, and you can probably find all the different species. Color variations. They were very interested in like this kind of color shift that could happen. So that's John Woodhouse Audubon. This is John James Audubon. So that was and what we, I didn't think that's not myself, but that was probably the same, you know, mink that they had that was stuffed, and then he just painted it to the colors. So, that badger, the artist who did that, Lanu, we probably never had that out. So that's really fun. That's from a portfolio of pieces that we have, also kind of a natural history, kind of bent. It's got the name of the animal and then its Latin version of its name. So the Picassos were illustrations for a version of a Buffon natural history. So he did maybe 30. It was a very special little limited edition set of engravings that he did. Yep. We'll set those. We put the whole thing out. 10 years ago. 20 maybe. 20-ish.
Is it all small?
No, so what you'll see in 3030 is I pulled out some of the big ones. So there's a goat, deer, bigger creatures. Yeah, so that was also interestingly like illustrating natural history text, but in Picasso super nice way.
How would they real illustrations?
Two Steve Kestrels that were out. The nest. So people left them out for a while, and that rattlesnake down there hasn't been out forever. It's fun. Last time we had it out, I think we were able to shine a light through here.